Now, in that context,
Uh-huh.
say a little bit about the. I mean, one has to here talk about the reality that what is often called settler colonialism.
Yes. Uh-huh.
Which is another way of saying white Europeans, who are now called, in our case, Canadians in a large sense, who formed a nation state, came with a radically other understanding of land, of space, which in shorthand is real estate.
Yes. Yes.
And talk a bit about the impacts that's had upon First Nations peoples, because here are radically different imaginations about the world and the place in which we live.
Yes. Well, that's good. It would be difficult to overstate the impact of Western notions of land and land ownership on the relationship with indigenous peoples. It's I think some would argue that that is the crux of the matter in the relationship and the difficulties in the relationship. And certainly the conflict over indigenous rights is in many respects a conflict over land and what land means. The way in which indigenous people have been dispossessed of their relationship to the land and at so many levels, including the ability to care for people and community in subsistence hunting and life. All of these things have been caused by this conflict between the indigenous notions of land and what it means, and the Western concepts of land and what it means. It seems to me that this conflict is a defining conflict in terms of that relationship, and it is, I think, part of the alienation that is going on between indigenous people and the larger society.
There is a, certainly here in Canada, although I would assume it has meaning and implications for the United States, and a good deal of our audience are also European, United Kingdom. But it seems to me that in this particular part of the world, the ways in which the Canada as a nation, with an understanding of land as contract and real estate, has sought to engage with First Nations people around what is called a nation-to-nation relationship. But inside of those notions of nation, particularly from the dominant white culture, are notions of real estate, ownership, and resource.
Right.
And so nation-to-nation conversation, in some ways, if I'm listening to you, is missing the point.
Right.
The much deeper question is one of what you've called ete, or land.
Yeah, it is. I think that although nation to nation has been a very helpful way of speaking about the relationship from an indigenous point of view, there's all sorts of mischief hidden in it, in that so much of nationhood, from a Western point of view, is tied up in a particular set of concepts regarding land and ownership. And these concepts do not speak well to the to either the traditional notions of land and its relationship to peoplehood on the one hand, nor does it relate well to the circumstances that indigenous people have been placed in by the conflicted and troubled relationship with indigenous people and with Western society and government and culture. So we're not just dealing with a pristine situation in terms of indigenous relationship to the land. We're dealing with the results of really centuries of policy that alienate indigenous people from that relationship with the land, or attempts to alienate indigenous people from the land, and to minimize their to minimize the depth of that relationship and its importance. All of this within the Western framework of land and law.